Let's strategize together. Let's hear it from an expert. Join the conversation, it's informative and free. You and me, let's talk some strategy. Now here's your host, Dorien Morin-van.
Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us live here at Strategy Talks. If you're live, thank you so much for tuning in on YouTube or Twitter, LinkedIn, or Facebook. If you are here on the replay and watching this on the replay, please put hashtag replay in the comments so that both my guest and I know that you're watching the replay. And a special shout out to those of you who listen to Strategy Talks as a podcast. Thank you so much for being here. Without much further ado, I'm going to pull in from the green room today's guest, and then I'll introduce you to her. Hi, Madhu. How are you?
Hi, I'm fine.
Awesome. So who is Madhu and why is she here? So let me show you who she is. Oh, you know what? My document just totally disappeared, Madhu. So I'm going to totally.
Okay. I can see you.
Yes, no, I was going to introduce you. I have your bio and then it disappeared. So yeah. Madhu Mathoera is from the Netherlands. She's an expert in, DEI. If you're wondering what that is, it's diversity. I'm going to let you say it. Diversity, equity, and inclusion, right?
Yes, it is. Yeah.
And so you wrote a book, The Inclusieve Organization. It came out last year. It's out in Dutch. Is it out in English yet?
No, not yet. We're working on the English version.
Okay, yeah. Awesome. So today we're going to talk about DEI and how to be more inclusive. And for those of you watching, I know my audience, there's a lot of freelancers, small companies, maybe you're an agency or one or two people. Maybe you are hired as a freelancer to help a larger organization. And when you see things happening in the organization, I wanted to ask Madhu about that. How can you bring forth, if you see an issue with inclusion, with people not being included in the conversation or people being ignored? So Madhu, that's really what I think would be a great place to start. So say you're a freelancer and you're working with an organization as a consultant, whether you're in marketing or HR, and you're pulled in and you have those outside eyes and you come in, which is really what you do, right? You go into organizations and you do that. What are some things that we can do to start conversations, or how do we approach that subject? I guess that's the first question I have for you.
For me, how I process this subject, I really would like to watch what the organization is doing. So when we talk about diversity, inclusion, and equity, what does the organization think about that, but also do about it? So how do they translate these terms to, let's say, communication, images, but also the way we talk, the way we act and our behavior. So what's really nice when I come in different organizations, I have a lot of examples, like best practices, but not so good practices, but also what you can do better as an organization. Because what I see a lot is that we struggle. We don't want to do it wrong. Right. And we're really cautious about, oh, can we do this? Can we say that? Is this okay? But when we become too cautious about this, we're missing the point and we're missing the connection we have with the customer or with the company that we want to reach.
All right. So I heard you say the language we use, the images we use, and let's go to that. Because a lot of my audience includes marketers. And so if you're a marketer and you're working with a company, first of all, if you're a marketer, you should be asking that company, like, who is your target audience? But even if your target audience is a specific, a woman age, 45, you still should have a diverse array of images, right? Especially if the images represent your company, right? So how do we do that? How do we have that conversation? And where do we find images that are of a more diverse nature?
We don't find those images in a lot of stock photos. What I see is companies struggling with, okay, and we need a picture, and we're going to to search a photo, and we only have the stock photo, so we have to take the best photo there is. So I see a lot of same kind of pictures in campaigns, and that's really a pity. When you look at diversity, you can show different diversity characteristics in a picture. Like gender, age, ethnicity, and so on. When we look at inclusion in a picture, it's about how are people interacting. And for example, let me take this example. Let's say somebody is in a wheelchair. What I see a lot is when we talk about accessibility in a company, we see a person that is in a wheelchair. But why don't we see this person on a normal photo? Let's say if you want to work at a company and we are introducing the company, I never see a picture of somebody who's in a wheelchair. And that's strange. So a lot of times we search for photos or diversity characteristics in photos when we need it. And we add it on, but it's not an add-on. A diverse person is not an add-on. So if you only want to check if your photo is diverse, it is not enough. You also have to think about the personas you use, the journey you use, and all are different people, different talents, but also different diversity characteristic. Can we see that back in the strategy we use and we have?
Okay, so that's really interesting. And then, of course, the other thing I want to point out is you're in the Netherlands. A lot of my audience is in the US. I do have people listening and watching from the Netherlands. So do you know any statistics on, or do you have any idea on how it differentiates between Europe and the US, where we are as far as being more exclusive? Is the US more exclusive? Do you think the Netherlands is ahead? What are you finding? Because a lot of us marketers work in different markets, right? We might work with a company in Romania or the Netherlands, or, we work with people in the US. Do you have any information on that for us?
When we look at differences in countries, you see that every country, but also every state or every company has its own challenges. So what I see in the Netherlands, that we are really challenging, the real challenge is about how can I as a person, but also we as a team and as a company, how can we become more inclusive? What can we change in our behavior, in the skills we have, but also make D&I a part of the DNA in the organization? So when we look at the struggles and the characteristics and the things we want to change, it's different in the different countries. But I think the challenge we all have is we want to include and not exclude. So I don't have the different numbers top of mind right now, but I think it's important not only to focus on challenge of a country, but challenges of your organization. And how can we change that? Because when we look at organization, there is no blueprint. A lot of people ask me, okay, Madhu, do you have the one size fits all? Do you have a blueprint? And there is no blueprint. Why not? And it's the same as in marketing, as we discussed also when we met each other, when we talk about communities. Every company is different. Employees are different. When you look at the culture, it's different. The legacy is different. So there is no one size fits all. You have to create your own blueprint. So that means you have to know what are the challenges people are facing on the workplace. When we look at leadership, is our leadership really inclusive? Or do we hire people that look like us and act like us? So when we look at this subject, it's more than just pictures. What are we saying? But it's also how do we think about equality, about equity, and also what are we changing to become more inclusive?
That's great. A couple of things that you said brought all kinds of new questions. So one of the things that I struggle with is, that leadership, right? In marketing, But in a lot of other organizations, it's a lot of the same people, that the same gender, the same color, they're in leadership. It doesn't mean people of different ethnicities or different genders or with different, that look or sound different than us aren't there or aren't as smart. They just sometimes aren't given the right opportunities, right? So what I hear you say is that it starts from within as leadership. What do we want? Who do we want to attract? And who do we want to put in leadership? And that's almost like a company culture thing. Is that right? Does it fall under company culture?
It is. And also when we look at leadership, they really have a great responsibility. They are a role model in the organization, and not only a role model if you look at behavior, but also when you look at how do you do things or how do you create things. And also when if you're a leader, what challenges are you facing, and is it something you want to solve yourself, or are you going to listen to the different voices in your team and the different experiences in your team, and just bring that in and then make a decision what works for the company, for the team, and not only for you as a leader.
Right. So
that's a skill we have to learn.
That's a skill we have to learn. So what if, I'm going to do the what if. What if you are hired as the one token female, or the one token, in the US would be like Latina or Latino, right? So what if you're that one person that gets hired and then you're there? Is there anything that and I don't want this, and this is something that I attended a session where somebody said, that's not enough. If you're the one token hire, then all the pressure is on you, which is not good either. Yeah. But are there things that we can do? So I guess the question is, does it come from the top down, which is kind of what you were saying, or does it come from the bottom up? Where lies that responsibility? So if you're the one hired, if you're disabled, you get hired, you're in that wheelchair, is it up to you to say, put me in a picture? Is it up to you to say, let's have the conversation? Is it up to you to say, we need to hire more people like me, or from the leadership down? Or is it a whole communication cultural thing that everybody, I'm trying to figure out, if somebody's watching, where can we start? Where can we start?
Yeah, and I think you gave the answer. It's really the whole. So when you look at the organization, every person that works in the organization has a responsibility. Responsibility when you look at inclusion. Do I include other people? Do I listen? Do I make space? Not give people a voice, because we all have a voice. You don't have to give me a voice. You have to give me a podium or space so you can hear what I'm saying. When you look at top down, when you want to work on this subject, if you want to attract more diversity, if you want to become more inclusive as a company, or you want to work on equity, you need money, you need time, you need commitment. And that's something that only top down is possible. So top down, we need the commitment, we need money, we need time. But we can also work, I don't want to say bottom up, but in the whole organization, we can work on this subject, like work councils, like project groups. There are a lot of forms that companies have to not only to let the leaders say, okay, this is important, this is why we want to be a more inclusive organization, and this is what you have to do. No, when you have the commitment, the time and the money, you can let people think in the organization what is important. So when we look at diversity, it is possible that some teams are more diverse than other teams. So let leaders and let employees think about how can we become or attract more diversity. When we look at inclusion, what are different signals that we get from the organization? What are things that are really going well, but what are things that aren't going that well? Do we have complaints about harassment, about the use of language? Who is getting promoted and who isn't getting promoted, and why? So we need to listen to the organization, and listening to the organization is not something you can only do top down. You have to do that throughout the whole organization. So when you have top down, like the money, the focus, commitment, and you know what is important for the organization, and we talk with employees in the organization, then you can go to the next step, and that is creating a why. Why do we as a company want to be more inclusive?
That's awesome. I heard you say something about language. And I think that's a huge one. There's so many words in our language that are non-inclusive.
It is. Yeah.
And whether it's in Dutch, right? And I was just in the Netherlands over the holidays, and I heard them. I think for the first time since I met you and talked to you and was more aware of how to be more inclusive, I started realizing that a lot of words in the Dutch language aren't that inclusive. And I think the same is in the US, words that we don't even realize we're using. Yeah. So is there a way for us to learn more about what language would be more inclusive? And I notice on the screen, for those of you who are watching, or I guess for those of you who are listening, that Madhu has her pronouns on the screen, she, her. That's one way, correct, that we can be more inclusive?
It's a way to give more space so everybody can be inclusive. Right. So this is a way you can. I put a she and her after my name, but there are a lot of ways. And when we look at communication, I'm also really curious what kind of words you heard in the Netherlands that were not so inclusive. Can you give an example?
I can't give an example right now. Okay, but okay. I know that I was kind of flabbergasted for some things, and I have one example, and I don't even want to say it, so I was that offensive. Yeah. But I remember like sayings growing up in the 70s of my mother saying things, or at school, and now when I think back, because remember, for me, I've been gone from the country 35 years, right? Yeah. And so my language is almost like I'm stuck in the 80s. And so I think some things have changed, but some of the things that I remember were not as exclusive. And then so when I came back, I still heard a few of those things, and I'm like, wow. But I think that if you're in the US, you'll find the same thing in English, that. So let's move to pushback. So say you're listening to this, you're in an organization, you are trying to be more exclusive, you're working really hard in your team, you're a hiring manager, you want to have a diverse group of people, you are understanding that you have to be inclusive. What if you get pushback from either the people on your team or your leadership? Are there anything that we could say, or we could do, or we could offer to those people that are trying really hard and getting that pushback?
Yeah. When you look at the pushback in the organization, when diversity, equity, and inclusion is not in a strategy, it's not in implementation, it's not in a policy, it's a choice. So everyone can choose if you want to be more inclusive. So in your example, this leader can say, okay, I think it's really important, but if the organization doesn't think it's important enough to make it a policy or to talk about this subject, there will always be a pushback. Because who says this is important? Don't everyone has the same chances? You get a discussion. And when we have a discussion, we talk about our own opinion, and we're not talking about expertise. So what we really would like to do is go from opinion, I think this is okay or not okay, I find this not offensive, why are you reacting like this? And when we move to how our expertise and how are we going to be more inclusive as a company, as a person, or as a leader, then I can give you feedback. Then I can say, oh, okay, I heard you say this, but this isn't really inclusive. Or help me, I'm struggling with this subject and we want to be more inclusive as a company. How can we do it? So I think we have to move from I to we. Okay. Or us. We have to make it bigger. So it's something that is in our DNA and is normal for the organization. When we look in the team, I think we all need to know, why do we want to be inclusive? Because if I think this is important, I'm going to tell you, oh, Dorien, it's so important, we have to do it. But if we don't have the same understanding, you're going to push back, and that's logic.
Right.
That's logic.
Yeah, that makes sense. And the other part with the pushback, what if somebody just dismisses it or makes fun of it, which I've heard happen when somebody says, oh, we really need to hire and be more exclusive, and they're like, and they say really offensive things right there in a meeting about, not wanting to include anybody. And what do you do then when somebody makes an off-color joke or says offensive things? How do we react to that?
There's some things you can do. The thing that really helps me is, but it's also because this is my work and this is what I do every day. Is to mirror. Okay, what you're saying is not okay. I don't want to discuss it here. Maybe we can discuss it after this meeting, or ask the question: why are you saying this? I don't understand why you're making a joke. So that's one. Approach. The other one is something we talked about earlier, and it is leadership. Leadership is a role model. And if leadership doesn't say anything when somebody is making a racist joke or a joke that is not okay, that means it's okay to make this joke. Because a leader has to make sure that there's a safe space and a safe culture. But if somebody makes a joke and nobody says anything, then it's okay. It is not okay, but we're saying by saying nothing that it's okay. So we have to say something. And if you really find it difficult to say it at the moment, just say it after the meeting. And maybe somebody really don't know why this is not okay to say. And that's also about education. And what I see in practice, a lot of people are saying, okay, that's unconscious bias. No, that's an excuse. You cannot say, okay, this is unconscious bias. I didn't know, because some things you really have to know. Like as a leader, if you have a team with different religions, you need to know what those religions are. You are leading people. If people have, let's say, when we look at age, when we look at gender, you need to know what are the difficulties people are facing. How are you going to lead your team otherwise? Right.
Yeah, let's talk about education before we wrap this up. I love that. Yeah. You kind of led us right there. So for those of us who want to learn more, who want to figure out how to start the conversation, have the conversation, lead the conversation, be the leader that we want to be, and be more exclusive. First of all, if you're in the Netherlands and you're watching this or listening to this, go buy Madhu's book, The Inclusive Organization. But for those of you who are not, what is a great place to start? What if somebody knows nothing and they're listening to this and they're watching you and they go, oh my God, I feel like I've been alone. Where can they start? How can they start educating themselves to know the right words to say, to know the right ways to have these conversations? What are some things to know? And where can we get some of this education? And I'm thinking especially for like freelancers, small business owners, what other education's out there for us?
When you look at education, what are the right words to use, or behavior? There is a lot of free information available online. So Google. When you are in an organization, let's go back. When you Google it, Google different stories. So you have different perspectives on this subject. And that's really important, the different perspectives on this subject.
Like what? So how to be more inclusive. What would you Google? Like
how can I be? Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Go ahead. No, you go.
How can I be an ally? Or what does inclusion mean? What does inclusion mean? Or how can I include people? Or what is unconscious bias? Just things like that you can Google and learn more about this.
Excellent.
But not only from one website, go find more websites, more stories. And that's the bridge. Find more stories. And you find stories by talking to people, to be curious. So when you are in an organization, but it can also be when you go to the sport or something else, somewhere else, you be curious. Ask somebody about their experiences, about just ask and make just ask the questions.
I love that.
That's
Be
it.
curious. Be curious.
Yeah.
Find the stories. So,
Yeah.
I want to wrap it back around to you because I didn't get to say talk about your bio and how you get started, but let's put it out there. Why are you such a champion for this cause? Maybe that's even the wrong word. It's not a cause. It's a thing that we all should know about. Why did you write the book? Why do you want everybody to be more inclusive? Let's talk about it.
Yes, I have a daughter and she's 15 right now. And I hope the world is more equal when she grows up, that we have equal pay, that she gets the same opportunities. And she has, she has my color. So I hope that people can see her talent and that she doesn't have to fit the mold of the organization. And what I see in the Netherlands, but also in the world, is that we created a system, and the system is it's really crazy. The system is for Netherlands, really for the white Dutch men. So when we look at talent, there are some competences that are linked to the white men that we find really important. But that's really strange, and we're missing out on talent. And that's really why I want to make work of D&I, is because we want to see more talent, and I want to work to a more equal world. And I know it's really a big thing, but if we all do a little step, if we all learn a little bit more about this subject, if somebody gives you feedback about, okay, this is not so inclusive what you're saying or what you're doing, please don't defend it. I have the right intentions. Listen, learn, and act. So if we all do a little bit, the world really can become more equal, and we can learn from each other, because we are all different, but we all have something to bring to the table. We all have our added value, and unfortunately, we are missing out right now.
We're missing out right now because we're not looking. We're looking on the outside instead of looking at the talent. I have one more question. So in the Netherlands, do people still put their picture on their resume? I know in Europe for a while people did that. In the US, we don't put pictures on a resume. Is that something that is gone away?
You see, in some companies, people still do it. A lot of companies also offer the opportunity to send your CV through LinkedIn, for example, and then you'll see the picture. Some companies I work with have like something like called an anonymous, so you can write a letter and your CV anonymously. And some companies say, okay, we don't want to do that because we want the motivation to be how can we select people and look at, okay, what do people bring to the table, and not look at what are the diversity characteristics. So yes, the answer to your question is yes, I still see pictures or photos in resumes, but I also see a change coming, and it's like you don't have to put in your name, where you live, your gender, and things like that. But when we look at LinkedIn, it's really, you can, if you search someone on the internet, you also have the picture. So I think it's really about what somebody brings to the table, what the added value is, but also asking the right questions when you have a job interview.
That's really, really good. Let's leave it there. Madhu, how can people get in contact with you? What's the best place online to connect with you, especially for those who are in the US who might want to eventually read your book once it's translated into English, or just follow you, because you do on LinkedIn speak
LinkedIn a lot.
LinkedIn, you're on there a lot. How can people how can they find you on LinkedIn?
At my profile, so that is this. I said this. That means so in English. LinkedIn and then / Madhu Mathoera. You can find me over there, or LinkedIn if you search on the Inclusieve Organisatie. So that's the translation of the Inclusive Organization in Dutch. You will find my page.
Okay,
and
for those
also. Yeah, you have my contact, I think.
Yes. So if you want to find her and you can't find her, contact me, but I'm going to put the links in the comments so you can connect with Madhu. Madhu, thank you so much for being here with us. I feel like there's so much more to unwrap, but I love that we started this conversation. And if this conversation sparks something in you and you want to learn more stories, want to have this conversation with your team, and you need help or you want to know more, connect with Madhu, because she probably has some of the best resources available for you to get started. And that's why I wanted to have Madhu. That's why I wanted to have you on this show. Not a lot of marketers are talking about this yet, especially those who have small teams. We might behind the scenes thinking about some of these things, but we don't really know how to get started. So I'm really glad that you're here and that we had this conversation, and hopefully it sparks more conversation, right? And we hear more stories. So thank you so much for being here. And go ahead and connect with her, and I'll see you next week. Bye, everybody.